Welcome to this video where I'm going to be talking about how I got to level 20 on the hardcore server. Now, getting to level 20 without dying, for some veteran players, might be rather trivial. But for a lot of players out there, the idea of getting to level 20 without dying at all may seem like just about an impossible task. And, there are a lot of people struggling with that. We know that because, when you're playing over here on the hardcore server, you're constantly seeing messages like these announcing when people die. So I'm going to talk about how I got to level 20 without dying, the build that I used, and offer a few tips and advice. So quickly, if you're not familiar with hardcore, it's a special event, and this is the first time that DDO has ever hosted something like this, where there's a separate server called the hardcore server that only VIPs have access to. It is a permadeath server, so if you die, that is it. You have to make a new tune and start all over at level 1 again. And there are various prizes that you can get for achieving different things, like getting to level 20, which was offered a reward that I was going for. There are rewards for getting a certain amount of favor, and there are rewards for getting a certain number of Reaper points. And these are like cosmetic rewards, and there's a cosmetic pet, and the reward that I was going for is this this sash, this cosmetic cloak, which I think is really new. It's kind of a new kind of cosmetic cloak. This is the first time they've done a sash like this where, well, what I really liked about this is I'm not a big fan of the cosmetic cloaks in DDO. I think they're gorgeous, but I don't like the fact that they block the view of the armor. Well, this sash doesn't block the armor, so I thought it looks really cool, and I'll still be able to see my armor when I'm running around, and I really like the nice touch of having the little skull in the corner with the Roman numeral 1. I just assume that signifies like this is the first hardcore event, right? And that maybe they'll do additional events in the future, and they'll have like a Roman numeral 2 or whatever for the next one. So let's see. I used my my Caster Druid Quasi Tank build, my favorite build, my Ginger Spice Druid build. And my other favorite build is my Voodoo Warlock build, and I considered both, and ultimately I decided to go with the Druid because I felt like, it had better self-healing. But after my experience over here getting to 20, I think that either build would have been just fine. In fact, I kind of wish I had done my Warlock build, but the Druid worked great. And I'll talk about why. And let's see. So I think the Druid was a good choice. The Druid Caster was a good choice because the Druid has good self-healing ability, but also the ability to use like wands and scrolls natively without having to do a UMD check on them. Over here on another server where we're doing like first life tunes that don't have, we don't have past lives, we don't have gear, it's a very different environment to play this game in. And if you're a longtime veteran of the game, it's going to take you back to when the game was at a newer state, and there just wasn't a lot of gear available, and the economy was different, and all these kinds of things. And it really can be a culture shock playing a first lifer without gear, without past lives, and realizing that the game is actually kind of tough. On Elite, when you don't have access to all the stuff on your main server. So I also like the Druid Caster because I have some higher defensive options, like the ability to use medium and heavy armor and shield, so that's going to give me some higher defenses like armor class and PRR. It's important to build in some survivability over here because obviously if you die, it's over, and you don't want to die. And building over here is going to be a little bit different strategy than maybe what you're used to building on your home servers. And because of that, because death is final over here. And so Because of that, people are typically taking much more cautious approaches, as I did. In fact, I took a very, very cautious approach, which I'll talk more about in a bit. But people aren't going to be doing like High Skull or even Mid Skull Reaper over here, right? Because who wants to run into a Vengeance Reaper and you didn't see the circle and it blows up on you and you're dead? Like, you don't want to take those kind of chances over here, right? So you don't need, for example, there goes somebody else. Sabbath has perished at level 30. That totally sucks, because obviously that person put a lot of time in to get to level 30, and somebody here in Korthos says, ouch. Oh, terrible, terrible. So you don't need some uber DPS build if you're just doing like elite questing or like maybe low skull questing. You're probably not going to find too many people doing like beyond like R1 or 2 skulls. Maybe there's some people doing out there like 3 and 4 skulls, but like I said, once you start getting to like the 5 skulls and you start running the Vengeance Reapers, like nobody's going to want to do that over here because it's just too big of a risk. I mean, you're not paying attention for a second. Like I said, you caught a Vengeance Reaper circle, bam, all over. So, like I said, you don't need uber DPS if you're just elite streaking or you're doing low skull stuff. And you can kind of back off your maybe DPS build choices and use some of those resources to go a little bit defensive. And in fact, that reminds me of, I had a couple guildies over here and they were running together, and I guess one of my guildies was dying quite a bit more often, and my other guildie was saying, hey, you need to be a little bit more, build some more defense. You don't have enough hit points, etc., etc. And he's like, oh, but my DPS, like, you don't need uber DPS to do elite quests, and you're not doing any DPS when you're dead, and you're not doing anything at all on hardcore when you're dead, because nobody can raise you, you can't gibbers up, like, all over, end of story. And you're starting at level, and you get your tune up to level 15 or something like that, and you got to start over at level 1. That's a lot of time lost, And this is a limited time event. It only goes for 3 months. We only got about a month left, but there's still time for you to get your rewards if you want to go for them. Okay, what else? So, good self-healing, ability to use healing wands and scrolls, a little bit higher defenses with the heavy and medium armor and shield. The druid also has lots of SLAs, which really helps. Over here on the first lifer, we don't have a lot of mana and a lot of resources, right? And so I really like the fact that I had, Produce Flame available like right away. I had Creeping Cold. Call Lightning is extremely powerful when you're just working in like an environment and doing like elite questing or like R1s or 2s. Call Lightning can one-shot a lot of mobs in a heroic environment. Got the Salt Ray, which is a single target, does force damage, but also stuns mobs, so it was nice to have that single target crowd control. And then Word of Balance is a pretty strong SLA as well. And then at level 12, I got the Sunburst, which is a blinding effect, nice crowd control. And at level 18, I got the SLA of Storm of Vengeance. So lots of SLAs really helps with mana conservation. I also want to mention too that, when you're deciding what build to play over here, make sure you choose a build that you're comfortable with. You don't want to be over here, on a first lifer where, it's permadeath and it's some build you're trying to like learn on the fly. You probably want to play something you're comfortable with. So if you're not already at least semi-familiar with Druidcasters, for example, I'm not trying to sell you on this build. If you're totally new to Druid, I wouldn't recommend trying something totally new over here on hardcore. But just wanted to mention, why I thought this was a good choice. Especially because, Druidcasters aren't really that popular. But, over here on hardcore, like I said, I feel like it was a pretty good choice. So lots of SLAs help with your low mana pool. Since we have that enhancement open, one enhancement that I really, really liked was Spring's Resurgence. If you're not familiar with this, this is a little buff you put on yourself, and whenever you fall below 50% health, it automatically kicks in a 20d6 heal. 20d6 heal is huge. And when you're not doing Reaper, you don't have to worry about any kind of self-healing debuff, so that's a lifesaver. And what's really neat about Spring's Resurgence is it will kick in situations where you would otherwise have died. I mean, if you had 100 hit points and you hit a nasty trap and that would have taken you down to like negative 50 hit points, that 20d6 healing goes into effect before it would have killed you. So literally will save your life in situations where you will otherwise die. So that was really awesome to have that. Really nice, sort of fail-safe over here in the permadeath environment of Hardcore League. It also has up here in Tier 5, Winter's Heart, and this is kind of like, this is a big temporary hit point buff that you can put on yourself. It's similar, not quite as good, but similar to like an Enlightened Spirit's Shining Through ability. Gives you 8 times your wisdom score in temporary hit points for 30 seconds. So if I knew I was running into a big group of mobs, or I had to run through a trap or something, I could toss that on myself as just another layer of protection, a temporary layer of protection. So that was pretty cool to have. Let's see. I also really liked that I had Featherfall built into my enhancement tree. So this is available pretty early on. Again, you don't have access to a lot of resources over here, so Featherfall, really important to have. I like having it, and most people, I think, like playing with it, and I didn't have to worry about trying to fit it in an item. I mean, we don't have like lots of augments and stuff over here, so I was able to not worry about Featherfall because I had it right there. Also has some dodge and a neat knockdown effect when mobs strike me in melee. So Featherfall taken care of. I also didn't have to worry about striding right away. Over here we don't have our Quivers of Alacrity from the Abbot raid, right? And running around really slow sucks, especially when, like, death is permanent, right? And you need to like run away from some mobs. So right away, the Druid has the Longstrider spell, which gives you 15% striding. And so, obviously you want to get better than that later, but right away at level 1, it's nice to have 15% striding from Longstrider. So I was definitely using that early on. The Druid also has some important buffs that I really wanted to have in a permadeath environment, including freedom of movement. Such an important buff. It just doesn't give the respect that it deserves in DDO. So many players who can even cast this don't seem to do it. This is the kind of a buff that you should put on yourself at the beginning of every dungeon, because it protects you not only from slippery surfaces like grease or sleet storm, but also is going to prevent you from getting like held. If a monster casts like hold person or hold monster on you, this will protect you from that. So very, very important buff. And again, especially in an environment like this where death is permanent. I don't want to get held or, slip around in some, Iron Defender, Grease, and Korthos or something, or in Harbor quests. I guess I wouldn't have had that in Korthos or in the Harbor, but you know what I'm saying. Another really, really important buff is Death Ward. Like, right? Death is permanent. You don't want to die, or so, you don't want some nasty Thrakhound hitting you with Phantasmal Killer or something like that. So Death Ward's really important, but it's also good to mention, since we're talking about Death Ward, that even if you have the ability to cast Death Ward, it is really, really good to have Death Block as a backup, because there's always going to be those times that, Death Ward runs out and you didn't notice, or it got dispelled or something, and you forgot to cast it or whatever. So, I was running, starting about level 10-ish or whatever, I was running with, there goes somebody else, only at level 3. That's not nearly as bad as dying level 30. So I was running, starting at about level 10, I was using a Death Block belt. Like I said, for those moments that, Death Ward wore off or it got dispelled or something, because, you don't want to have any accidents, because, again, you only get one chance. If you die, you got to make a new tune and start over at level 1. Lots of other great spells the Druid has. You have some Lobby crowd control with like Entangle, which I definitely used at lower levels. Charm Animal is an often overlooked spell. I love Charm Animal. Even if you don't have good DCs, it's going to hit certain mobs like vermin, like scorpions and spiders, like pretty much every time, because mobs like scorpions and spiders have like jack for save. So it's kind of neat to be able to charm mobs like that, and you can even charm other animals. In addition to animals proper, it also can charm, like I said, vermin, also magical beasts. So not just animals proper. So, Gust of Wind was nice for blowing out persistent AoEs like firewalls and things. Sleet Storm is a great crowd control spell that is often overlooked. As long as you have freedom of movement, you're not going to slip around in your own Sleet Storm. And Sleet Storm is great for groups. And by the way, this project I did like 95% solo. I grouped with some guildies like on the first day for like harbor questing, but after that I was pretty much solo. So if you're trying to do some hardcore stuff solo, you can do it. Let's see what else. Obviously healing spells. The druid has 4 dots, which is great. Really nice boss DPS. Some AoE DPS like Ice Storm and Firewall. I really liked using Stone Skin. I was using Wands of Stone Skin early on, which you can purchase from the 12. Just in case you don't know, there is a shop in the 12 called In the Runes, right there inside the Tower of the 12, and you can get Stone Skin wands there. So I was using those like at level 7. But a little bit later on, because it gives more protection. It gives you DR10/adamantine for a limited amount of damage, and that's a nice layer of defense over here. So don't forget about your old buddy Stone Skin. And wands are a great way to conserve mana. But like I said, later on it gave me more protection. When I had a bigger mana pool, I felt pretty good about casting the actual spell. Let's see. Fire shield's great for those situations where, if you're going to be walking into a lot of fire or cold damage. It does 50% mitigation, a very, very important buff that, again, is often underappreciated, kind of like freedom of movement. Freedom of movement, sometimes people will say to me, I just cast it when it's needed. Like, well, sometimes, you don't want to wait until you're slipping around in grease or when you're held. And when you're held, you can't cast it. So that's the kind of thing that you need to cast at the beginning of a dungeon. But Fire Shield is a shorter duration buff. So, you put that on yourself when you're going into a situation where you take a lot of fire or cold damage to help mitigate a lot of that. Let's see, what else? Earthquake, obviously, at level 15. That was huge. Sunburst is great for blinding mobs. It's a nice layer of crowd control. When mobs are blinded, they don't do so well with hitting you when they're blinded. Alright, what else? So at level 13, I had access to Elemental Form. And one of the nice perks of Elemental Form is you get 100% racial bonus to Fortification. So starting at level 13, I didn't have to worry about Fortification anymore, right? And that was just another thing, gearing is tight over here. We don't have all our augments from our main server. I didn't have heavy fort augment over here, green steel or whatever. So trying to fit in all the things you want with, you're going to be using a lot of randomly generated loot, especially at first, can be kind of tough. So it was really nice to just have Fortification taken care of once I had level 13 and had access to Fire Elemental Form. And I did choose that first. You get your first Elemental Form at 13, and then later I chose Water Elemental at 17. And when I got Fire Elemental Form at level 13, Body of the Sun was totally awesome. If you're not familiar with the spell, it's an extremely powerful spell in like a non-Reaper environment, which is, a lot of what you're going to be doing is non-Reaper over here. And Body of the Sun is, let's see, that's this thing. Does this big glowing aura and basically turns you into a walking firewall. So it's a really fun spell. It's very powerful, like I said, in a heroic non-Reaper environment, and I used the hell out of this, and it really helps to extend my mana pool when I am the firewall and the firewall moves with me basically. And you can even throw a firewall down and then they'll take damage both from Body of the Sun and Firewall. But this is a really cheap spell to cast too. You don't apply meta magics to it, just Quicken. But even though, you know, you can't apply like Enlarge or like Empower and Maximize, it scales better than Firewall on its own, so it does a significant amount of damage, and I found it to be really, really helpful. And then once you get level 17, you can actually damage mobs with Fire and Cold, even if they would otherwise be immune to it when you have access to your 9th level buffs, Mantle of the Icy Soul, and Anger of the Noonday Sun. So, you know, once, like I said, once I got to level 17, I could use that Body of the Sun to damage anything in the game, including like Iron Golems that are normally healed by fire. When I had Anger of the Noonday Sun on me, I could damage an Iron Golem with fire, for example. So loved Body of the Sun starting at level 13, and used it pretty much from that point right up into 20. Another reason I think the Druid was a nice choice is because of the wolf, the companion animal, as well as summon spells. Druids automatically get summon spells. You don't have to, you know, take up a slot memorizing them. You get, you know, all your Summon Nature's Ally every level automatically, kind of like how a Druid kind of like how a Cleric automatically gets healing spells. So I had my my wolf companion and summons, and when when you're soloing a quest, you know, normally all the aggro is on you, right? Because you're the only one in the dungeon. But when you have your wolf companion out and you have a summons out, now you have 3 bodies that all the aggro and all the damage is spread out on, instead of all of it on you. So I loved the fact that my wolf was grabbing aggro, my summons were grabbing aggro. You know, if they take damage, good. If they die, fine. Better them than me, right? So that was another little perk. Though I found the wolf and the summons to be really helpful for grabbing aggro and you know, like I said, them taking damage and not me. By the way, I will put a link to my build in this video description. You know, this is the same build that's part of the Tiefling Druid series that I'm doing right now. I only made a couple of modifications to it. At level 15 and 18, instead of taking Empower Healing and Evocation Focus, I actually decided to take Mental Toughness and improve Mental Toughness, because in, you know, just a heroic non-Reaper environment, I didn't need the Empower Healing. I didn't really feel like one more Evocation Focus was going to do anything for me, but those extra spell points were really valuable. I also, on the wolf side, see, normally when I'm doing like the Druid build on the main server, I don't want my wolf to get extra aggro. So normally I would stay away from like Alpha Wolf that increases aggro, and I would choose Cunning Wolf instead. But over here on the hardcore server, I wanted my wolf to get the aggro, so I took Alpha Wolf instead of Cunning Wolf. Normally I would take Cunning Wolf. And there's some other abilities, I didn't take them, but there's some other abilities that increase aggro that you could take as well. But just real quickly, this is the way that I had my wolf enhancements. You can see some numbers that the wolf had. You also see the numbers that I had. Unfortunately, you know, my armor class and PRR would have been a little higher if I had gotten a piece of heavy armor that I was trying to farm for, but I didn't get that. I will talk about some gear that I thought was important to farm for on this tune, and some other items as well. And I guess I can go ahead and mention that stuff now. So first thing is, you know, if you have the Sharn boarding pass, if you purchase the big Sharn package, I would highly recommend that you hotkey this. You know, when normally you click on it, you get 4 different choices. Well, you know what? Take one of those choices. I didn't mean to click that, but that's fine. And actually drag it into your hotbar and have it hotkeyed, because if you get into a quest and things start going sideways and you need to get the hell out of Dodge right now because you don't want to die, you can just hit that and bam, you're in Sharn. So you're saying drag it down into your hotbar, have it hotkeyed, then you can just one touch get out of a dungeon in an absolute emergency. I can't remember if I actually had to do that. I might have done it once pretty early on. I think I did it once. So some other items, like, right away early on in Korthos, I made sure to get the Archivist necklace. Don't have a lot of resources over here, so there's a couple little hits of some extra spell points, which were valuable. I used this thing a whole bunch of times throughout my 1 to 20 project. I also made sure to get some, craft some minor petrifying runestones. You don't need any levels of crafting to be able to craft the level 3 version there, in the Caneth Crafting Hall. And, this was, a nice little single target crowd control. You can stone a mob with this. It's got a DC of 24, so for low B single digit levels, that's, good enough. If I hit a champion or something I didn't want to deal with, I could petrifying with that. So you just load it up on your hotbar and target a mob. And you can't spam it, unfortunately, because there's a really long cooldown, but it's definitely something nice to use in a pinch. And if you can get your whole party to use these, it's great. You can all stone a whole bunch of mobs, and it's really, really wonderful. Let's see, at level 7, well, the quest that this drops from is actually a level 9 quest, and so I don't think I hit it until then. But the Twisted Talisman is another mana clicky. This gives 3 charges of 50 spell points each, but you also take 25 damage, and that's scaled up in Reaper mode, but you're probably not going to be doing anything beyond a few skulls here on hardcore. In any event, I wanted to make sure to have every mana clicky that I reasonably could, so I made sure to go for that. Starting at level 8, when you get out to Sands of Nectarin, you can hit General Tanak's chest in the back of the undead zone, the mummy guy, and you can farm for Ring of Spell Storing. I will say that actually it was a channel viewer actually gave me this over here, which was really generous, so thank you so much. That was really nice. I didn't have to farm for it because it was given to me, but I definitely would have started farming for it right away at level 8 if I didn't have it already. Spell absorption, always important. I did not actually go for the Mantle of the World Shaper because I was too afraid to go to Thrennel, and I'll talk about my quest strategies in a bit, but the Jeweled Cloak can come out of Trial by Fire in Giant Hold or Maze of Madness. They both drop it, but you can also get it as a chain reward, which I just have the normal version. I got it as a chain reward. So it's 5 charges of spell absorption from the normal version. So you get in a situation where there's a boss or something that casts some nasty spells at you, you can pop that on. It's a nice layer of defense. Okay, other gear. I tried to farm for the Runic Trinket. That's a really, really nice low-B caster trinket that comes out of Repossession in the marketplace. It's part of the Sharn Syndicate chain. I ransacked it with a friend, never pulled it. It comes from the end reward, but that is an item that I would have liked to have. Another item, a low-B item that I made sure to get was the Braces of Wind. I started with the level 3 version, which I couldn't actually get it until I think level 4, because at least one of the challenges that I needed to run it was level 4, even though the item itself is level 3. So obviously it's a level 15 version, but you can upgrade each version. I did start with the level 3. The level 3 version has magnetism and lightning lore, so that's great to keep you want your electric spell power to be high because you want your call lightning to hit. Like I said, call lightning, extremely powerful. One-shots a lot of mobs in a heroic non-reaper environment. Even if you're doing like one skull, you can sometimes one-shot some mobs with a good call lightning. But it also has blurry, so 20% miss chance, all on blurry. That was a nice layer of defense. So Braces of Wind was a really, really high priority for me. And every time I could upgrade it to the next level is a level 3 version, then a level 7 version, then a level 11 version, and then 15. And so I just upgraded it every time, as opposed to buying those higher level version outright. It costs about half the ingredients to just upgrade the previous, like the level 3 to the level 7. Also, when you're farming for the Braces of Wind, uh, I want to make sure that that you can, if there are certain challenges that you're not good at or you don't want to do, like I didn't want to do the Kobold Island one, so I could just do extras of the Circles of Power, and you can actually use some of those. You can use those ingredients to trade for different ones at a rate of like 2 to 1. So, I could use the Circles of Power to get the obsidian arrowheads, I think it was, and I could trade the obsidian arrowheads for the crude talismans that I needed, which would have otherwise come out of the Kobold Island challenges, which I did not want to do. So realize that you can trade for those right there at the challenge traders. So Braces of Wind, really important to get right away, and upgraded it as soon as I could at every level. I didn't go for like the tier 2 and tier 3. That can adds a little bit higher stats and slots. I didn't really have any augments to put in there anyways, but if you wanted to, you could upgrade it to the higher, to get like higher spell power and higher lore. But for purposes of this project, I didn't bother. Another item that I really liked over here was the Fjarlin Mirror Cloak. This is a great cloak for just about any tune. Spell resistance 17 is a meaningful amount of spell resistance, in a heroic environment. So I was wearing this, I farmed for it right away. I was wearing it right up until I hit level 20, and I also supplemented my spell resistance with an insightful spell resistance randomly generated item. So, that's 17 plus 9, that's 26 spell resistance, a very significant amount of spell resistance to have, in a heroic environment. And so there's just another nice layer of defense. At level 7, I decided to farm out a Voice of the Master from Delira's. I actually, just at level 7 did the whole chain on normal. So the last couple parts are a little bit higher level, but I just did it on normal. I really just wanted to get the Voice of the Master. So this is a nice, 5% XP boost. And, in this environment where you don't have a lot of gear, the +1 good luck, I liked having that too. Let's see, what else? I'll also say that once I hit level 10, I started doing some Slayers out in the orchard, and it was nice to use that as an opportunity to farm out some tapestries, which sold really well over here. You don't have access to your wealth from your main servers, right? And you're broke as a joke over here, so finding a way to build up a little bit of plat is important, and those tapestries were selling really well. So that's one way that you can build some wealth once you hit about level 10. A piece of gear that I farmed for, in fact I ransacked the quest twice and even brought some looters in, was the Pan-Sophic Circlet. I never got it, unfortunately, but that would have been a really nice general potency item to have, especially nice for the Druid, because the Druid does so many different damage types, and trying to cover each with an individual item is difficult, if not impossible, to cover all the bases. So a general potency item, really nice. Like I said, unfortunately, I did not get it, even though I ransacked that quest twice. I only ever ran it like on hard, though. The first couple runs I did on normal, but first handful of runs maybe. But once I got a little bit higher level, I started running it on hard. Never dropped. Some of the other items dropped, but not the circlet. So had to live without that. And then at level 14, I started farming out Madness of Crowds, because that has 4 different items that are really awesome for a caster druid, including the Giant's Platter. Nice, it has high magical sheltering, natural armor, vitality, and protection. And this is part of a 2-piece set, the Seasons of Change set. And another part of that set is the Wild Frost, or the Wild Flame Sickle. The Wild Flame Sickle is just like this, except for it's the fire version, and instead of conjuration focus, it's evocation focus. Either one, this is the one that happened to drop for me, so I just used it. So it was my source of glaciation and ice lore, and completes the Seasons of Change set. Or you could actually dual wield the Wild Flame and Wild Frost, but I liked having the shield because it adds extra defenses, extra armor class, extra PRR. There's also a set of heavy armor out of Madness of Crowd called Scales of the Exile. It never dropped for me, so I ended up just going with randomly generated hide armor, medium armor, because that's all I could get. And I had this version has devotion on it. But the heavy armor would have been really nice because that would have been higher AC and higher PRR. So that's some of the gear. That's the gear that I, was going for, that I felt was important. I didn't want to spend like a ton of time trying to get every last piece of gear. I knew I was just going to be doing lower difficulty stuff, and I didn't need some kind of uber build or, every last piece of gear just to get to level 20. So let's talk about the quests and strategy that I did. Now again, it's permadeath, so you want to be cautious. Everybody over here is being cautious. Like I said, you're not doing high skull stuff. You're not even doing mid skull stuff. If you're doing Reaper at all, it's going to be really low skull stuff, more than likely. Because I, absolutely, wanted to make sure that I didn't have to, do the whole project over, once I got the high level, I wanted to take things really, really cautiously. And so what I did is I just hard streaked. And we'll sort by a level. So when I started off in Korthos, I was actually just doing quests on normal. Like, I didn't have anything at that point, right? I had no gear, no potions. Potions, by the way, were really important once I could afford them. I wanted to make sure I had curse removal potions, disease removal, neutralize poison, remove blindness, and lesser restoration. Very, very important. I didn't have anything, so I was just doing quests on normal. Once I got out of Korthos and I had a few pieces of gear, I started doing quests on hard. In fact, I think it was day 2. I actually had some guildies at low level that I was grouped up with for a day, and so that's why we did some quests on elite. In fact, one of my guildies was like level 5, so there was like 4 of us, so I felt okay doing elite with a 5, and I think even my other guildies were a little bit higher level too. So those were the only elites that I did, is these harbor level 2s. After that, I was all solo, and I just did hard quests. So, if the quest is level 3 on normal, like where there's smoke, that means it's level 4 on hard. So at level 4, I did a quest like where there's smoke on hard difficulty. Realize that when you're on a first lifer, you literally need half as much XP to get to level 20 as like a third lifer and beyond. So getting a first lifer to level 20 is a lot easier than the multi-lifer. So I'm not worried about elite streaking or getting that extra XP out of Reaper mode and stuff. Like, hards are just fine, and even just doing hards, I was able to skip most content. Now, when I decided on the quest that I was going to do, I didn't just do my regular routine. I was extremely selective on which quests based on, did it have traps? If it had a lot of traps, I avoided it. Did it have things that were going to insta-kill me, like the Thrackhounds that can cast, like, Phantasmal Killer, or Thrackhounds also do Cyclonic Blast, which is extraordinarily deadly spell, especially when you're under-geared and you don't have any past lives. So if a quest had like Thrackhounds in it, forget about it. Beholders, forget about it. I don't want to get Death Ray to the face and roll a 1, or Disintegrate or something and roll a 1. So if it had Beholders, Thrackhounds, lots of traps, mobs that would stat drain me, say something like Desecrated Temple of Vol that has all those shadows that drain your stats and can actually kill you if they drain your stats, to below 0. So I avoided anything like that and just did quests on hard. So you can see I skipped a lot of content. I did repossession on elite. I was with a guildie who was higher level, so we were fine. That's a shorty. And I made sure to stand behind him. But everything else, elite. really, again, trying to avoid quests with a lot of traps and things like that. Even on hard, I didn't want to take the chance of, getting hit by some nasty trap and rolling a 1 and taking a lot of damage. So just really cautious, knowing that I didn't need, I only need half as much XP to get to 20 as I would on a third lifer and beyond. So I'm just quickly scrolling up and giving you an idea of the quests that I did. Every time I got to a new level, I looked at the quest for that level range and just thought very carefully about the choices. So a quest like Zorian Cipher, forget about it. Now, I was just going for the level 20 reward. There's rewards based on favor. So if you're going for a reward based on favor, that's a different strategy. Or if you're going for like Reaper point rewards, that's a different strategy. But I'm going to talk about why I still think that this would have been a good choice for that and what I would have done if I was going for those. So you can see I skipped most content. And just because it's yellow doesn't mean I did it. Like here, Haywire Foundry, I didn't do that. I just picked the quest up. That's why it's yellow. You can see here, and it doesn't show any favor. I didn't actually have that done. Even though that's a quest that, I would normally do on my home server. Look at this. At level 10, all I did was Psychros Jewel and Reclamation at Ataraxia and Chamber of Vermont. That's all I did at level 10. And then I just did Slayers for the rest of it. And that was another important part of my strategy, because Slayers are, really, really low risk. Slayers are easy. You go grab your Explorers, do your Rares, build up your Slayer numbers a little bit, and it's just really easy XP. Did some Sands quests. I actually did Wiz King. I just couldn't say no to that big XP, even though it does have quite a bit of traps. By that point, I had Spring's Resurgence, I had Winter's Heart. I felt pretty good about going in there on hard. And it was just fine. Madness of Crowds was, at this point, the one quest that I did on Elite, but I was over level by the time I was doing it on Elite. I farmed the heck out of it, but unfortunately never got that armor. But I did get a couple of the other items, the sickle and the shield. Quests like Crucible, forget about it. I love the quest, but, way too many things could go wrong in there. And knowing that I just didn't need as much XP to level, I skipped quests like that. Lots of traps, lots of nasty things to kill you in there. So look at this. Here's another level 15. I did 2 quests, Ruinous Schemes and Thralls of the Fungus Lord. And that was it. Level 16. I did a handful. Lords of Dust, Magma Must Flow. Although I'll tell you what, Magma Must Flow, I wouldn't have done that. I had forgotten about like those little creepy crawly spiders that explode. Like, I don't want to get anywhere near something like that. I forgot that those were in there. So, but by the time I realized that, I was fine. I didn't want to recall out, but if I had thought about that ahead of time, I would have even skipped that one. But in the end, it was no big deal. Other quests that I love, like Rainbow in the Dark, one of my favorite quests. No way. I'm not taking the chance of falling on those spike pits or anything like that. For the most part, I just did quests on hard, and I didn't repeat them, with the exception of just a handful of quests. Like I did Running with the Devils. Actually, I was level 19. I needed a little bit more XP, so I went back and did Running with the Devils on normal. And I also went back and did Lords of Dust on normal. And I also did, finished it up. My last quest I did was Good Intentions on normal when I was level 19. Again, I just needed a tiny bit more XP, and I was like, don't want to take any chances. Let's take it really easy. So you can see very, very few quests. Just the quests that I knew that would be so, low risk. Now let me show you the the Slayers that I did, because you can see here, starting with like level 10 Slayer zones and up, I did a lot of, a lot of them I did all the Explorers for, or most of them. And some of them I built up my Slayer numbers pretty high, like Veil of Twilight. I took my Lamania and Shavra Slayers to 1,500 each. Let's see, others, I just took up to like smaller tiers, like 100 on the Battlefield, 200 in the House Canis Manufactory, 300 in Stormhorns, 400 in Swami, Reaver's Refuge. Took the Orchard Slayers up to 1,500. I was lucky to get a 5-stack of major Slayer pots in a daily roll, so I used I think I used 4 of those, and really leveraged that. So, like I said, Slayers are really cautious, low risk way to get XP. So that was my approach when deciding the content to do. Really just uber conservative approach, avoiding things with traps, avoiding anything that you could insta kill me. I mean, even quests, like what is it, reclaiming memories out in the Dreaming Dark Island, like that has like those stalactites from the ceiling that can fall down, and those things hurt, and the last thing I want, I don't want to be like level 18 and I'm out there and one of them hits me and I roll a 1 and the damage dice was big and I'm just dead. Like, I don't want to take that chance. As small of a chance as that might be, I didn't need to take that chance. There's plenty other of content for me to choose from, so really just avoiding anything that would be potentially dangerous like that. So, if I had been going, if I wanted like the 5,000 favor reward, or even the Reaper point rewards, there's rewards for 10 Reaper points and rewards for 20 Reaper points, I still would have used this build, and this is what my strategy would have been. I still would have done the hard streaking up to 20. Once I got to 20, what I would do next is I would do Slayers up to 30. There's lots of great XP from Slayers. Go out to King's Forest, do your Grim Disturbance. You can get a level or 2. You can do that, in an hour if you have a big Slayer pot going. Maybe, and then I also probably would have done my Evening Star challenges, CR35. Do all 6 of those, big XP there. Orchard Slayers, Thunderhome Slayers. These are huge XP, and then use that easy big XP from Slayers challenges, and you can even do some of your dailies too, like Von 3, Spies, that kind of stuff, and using that easy XP to fill out my epic destinies, emphasizing maxing out my primary destiny, also emphasizing picking up the twists along the way, getting enough levels, enough points in those other destinies that have the twists that I want, so that by the time that I got to 30, I had, probably not all the twists that I want, but some really important ones. Like if it was a druid, I would want to get Tsunami out of a Primal Avatar, for example, and then I like to run the Unyielding Sentinel Destiny because this is a tanky tune, so I would want to get that maxed out. So by the time I got to level 30, I get my destiny that I want to be in maxed out. Now I'm at level 30 with my main destiny maxed out, and I've got a few fate points. I got a few twists of fate that I can live with. Then what I would have done at that point is did most of the legendaries. I would have definitely avoided some potentially problematic ones, but probably would have done a good 30 of the legendary quests, if not 40 legendary quests, just on R1. Right? I've got my destiny maxed out. I'm feeling pretty good. I've got some gear. I've got some twists. Just on R1, that's low risk, and that might net me 40,000-50,000 Reaper XP. And then I would epic reincarnate back to 20, getting an epic past life, and then immediately reincarnate again, either racial or class, depending on whatever would have been better, and then go back to 1. Now I have an epic past life, I have a heroic or a racial past life, I've got a handful, maybe 6 or 7 Reaper points from doing those legendaries on R1. Now I'm starting back at level 1. I've got more build points and all that other stuff. Now is on that second life is when I would start building, going up for the favor. And I would probably either elite streak or do R1s all the way up and go for that 5,000 favor there. Again, I'm starting with a handful of Reaper points, so I'm feeling a lot better, and I've got gear from my first life, so I'm feeling a lot better about like doing R1s, getting bigger XP, getting a little bit of Reaper XP, and then again taking it all the way up to 30, and then bam, hit those legendaries on R1 pretty much across the board, skipping some potentially problematic ones, and then that's going to net me, you know, another 40, 50, 60,000 Reaper XP. Now by the time I finish my second life, I'm sitting at 100,000 Reaper XP. That's your 10 Reaper XP reward right there. If you want to go for the highest Reaper point reward, which is 20 Reaper points, that's 400,000 Reaper XP. Well, you can sit there and just keep farming out legendary dailies, or not legendary dailies, but yeah, your legendary dailies just on R1. If you do them every day, it's not going to take you very long to build up to 400,000 Reaper XP, even if you're just doing them on R1, taking a super cautious approach and just taking your time, you know, hit your dailies, just R1, low risk, and just take that up to 400,000 and you'd be good to go. So that's what I would have done if I was going for those rewards, but I really just wanted this one. I thought it was really cool. Originally, I wasn't even going to do hardcore because there weren't any rewards that I felt were like kind of low-hanging fruit. I thought this was one of the Reaper point rewards, but then when I found out this was just for getting to level 20, I said, hey, I can take it to level 20. And like I said, I did it without dying at all. I never had to restart, and I just did it. You know, I spent on average, you know, like maybe a few hours overnight, you know, every other night-ish or so. I didn't want to spend a ton of time over here because, you know, I'd lead a guild and a lot of raids and stuff over on my main server. So just over here playing like in the middle of the night and early morning and stuff, just a few hours like every other day kind of thing. And here I am. So I hope I've given you some tips that can help you if you're struggling in Hardcore League. And I'm going to put a link to my build in this video description. I also want to mention that my guildie Nimvind, who a lot of you know from my videos and my live streams, he was a guest on DDOCast a few weeks ago where they were talking about tips for Hardcore League. So I will put a link to that DDOCast episode in the video description. Thank you for watching. Good luck on Hardcore, and stop and see me over on my Twitch channel Voodoo Spice, where I'm live streaming with Nimvind and my other guildies nearly every day.